Okay. Hi, hello English readers, and welcome to Lydie's Book Club August live read along. I'm Lydie Bureau and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations of classics of English literature and contemporary novels. Each month, we read and explore a different book for all levels of English. And once a week, I meet the members of the book club in a live workshop via Zoom to discuss the chapters of the book that we are currently reading. In this book club, I also tend to prioritize books that are written by women. And this month, we are reading the contemporary novel Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. Well, now we're finishing reading this novel today. So we read this novel in its integral text. So for that, you needed to have an advanced level, and to be able to follow the workshops and to read this novel, you need to have a C1 plus advanced level. It can be quite difficult at times to read this novel, especially if you're non-native speaker. There are loads of vocabulary, technical vocabulary around the ocean, around the body, and the science around the ocean and the sea creatures. So bear that in mind. But if you love reading, if you're curious and you love the ocean and marine creatures, then you will definitely like this novel. And if you would like to know more about this novel and Julia Armfield's work, I invite you to listen to the podcast episode 23, an introduction to Julia Armfield and Our Wives Under the Sea, which is available on this YouTube channel, of course, and also on the Spotify podcast Read in English. You can find all the podcasts and the live readings as well. So today, this is session 10, and this is the final live reading session of Our Wives Under the Sea. And we are going to read the final pages from 206 to 229. You can find all the reading schedule. Every time that I'm hosting a live read along, I post all the reading schedule dates and times on my website, but also on Instagram account. So you just click on the link to go to be directed to my website. You can rewatch all the live readings here on the YouTube channel and also on the Spotify podcast. And in addition to these live readings, I'm hosting also 3 live workshops. So I've been hosting 2 so far, and we're going to do the last live workshop this Saturday, which is going to be based on the last live reading session that we've been doing this week. And these workshops are a great way for the members of the book club to have an opportunity to improve their English and their speaking skills and reading and listening skills, and also develop their critical thinking skills. So these live workshops are hosted on Zoom. So as I mentioned earlier, you have to become a member of the book club to be part of the conversation. So to become a member, you just subscribe, you just follow the link in the description and join the book club. Also, I'm pleased to announce that you can now purchase the live workshop, the 3-part live workshop on Daisy Jones and the Six, which is our July live read along. Again, we read this book in its integral text. Hi, Diane, welcome. We read this book in its integral text, so you have to have a C1 advanced level in English. It's a bit easier. The structures and the vocabulary in this novel is a little bit easier to approach than this novel. And it's also about, it talks about music and the 70s in America. So the topic of this novel is, I would say, perhaps lighter, or more close to us in terms of cultural, pop culture, I would say. So if I had to recommend a novel to start between the two, I would say start with Daisy Jones and the Six, see how you're doing with this one, and then read this one, which they're completely different topics, but in terms of complexity of the structure of the sentences and on the vocabulary. And also with this book, you have there is an Amazon Prime TV series based on this book. So that will definitely help you to understand the novel if you find it a little bit difficult. So if you've never read an original text, a book in its original text, then I would recommend this one instead of this one. Right. Once you've purchased, also, I just want to specify that once you purchase the live workshop on Daisy Jones and the Six, you'll be asked to create a login, password, and everything, which will give you a private access to the videos. And this way you'll be able to watch them whenever you want and wherever you want, basically. So that being said, I'm going to start with the recap, as I always do in my live readings. Before I start reading, I always take a couple minutes, sometimes a bit too much, I would say. Anyway, I do a little recap of the previous live reading session and the chapters that we read yesterday. So if you are just landing on this video, or if you stopped reading the book, or if you just if you need a little bit of a reminder of what, I'm not gonna recap everything about the story, so it's better if you have read the book, or if you have been reading the book with us. So yesterday we read pages 181 to 205, and in these chapters, so we have started the Adal zone, which is the last layer of the ocean. So the ocean is divided in 5 layers. So thanks to this amazing novel, we have learned so much about the ocean, about scientists, marine scientists. So it was a real discovery here. So the ocean is divided in 5 zones: the sunlight, twilight, midnight, abyssal, and the Adal zone. And so we started, we've read halfway through. We are halfway through the Adal zone. And in this layer of the ocean, in this last layer of the ocean, basically it's dark and it's it is a zone, an area that hasn't been explored yet. So no human or vessel, or any researcher has been able to reach the depth of this of that ocean. You've got if you want to know more about the meaning of those different layers, you go page 76, and on this page you have Leah the character of the story, the scientist in the story, who she explains the meaning of these different zones. So you have here, and you can understand better the meaning of them. And in the adult zone, which is roughly 19 to 36,000 feet down below the ocean. So we are not sure. So we're not sure whether there are creatures, because so far no human. So this part of the ocean hasn't been explored by any human. So we're not sure whether if it's inhabited or not. So it's quite a mystery here. So we are in this layer, in this in this section of the book called the adult zone, and I would assume, or we could suggest that these different layers represent the different stages of Miri and Leah's relationship. And now we're reaching a point of no return, because we are starting, so the author starts unraveling all the different mysterious element in the stories that the character of Miri could not understand, and us as reader as well. So in this chapter, in this in this reading session, we learned that Jelka, one of the member of the crew, so there were 3 in the vessel, and so Jelka, Matteo, and Leah. And Jelka is really bothered, and she's struggling to have to deal with the sound that she hears constantly in her head since the vessel has drowned. So these 3 scientists, researchers, sea researchers, are in this craft, and something has happened, and they just fell into the bottom, if there is one, of the ocean. So they're, we could say, the abyssal zone, which is 13,000 feet down in the ocean. So which is basically where the Titanic is, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is roughly where they stand. And Jelka is constantly hearing sounds and this voice in her head, and she starts to have delirious bursts, and she starts to talk to herself, and it's hard for Leah and Matteo to cope with her and to try to understand what is going on with her. And at some point we learn how, because we learned that Jelka died, but we didn't know how. And in page 187, we learn how. So basically, she had planned to open the escape trunk handle, or the door from the escape trunk, and leave the vessel. So which is very dangerous, because at knowing that they're so deep in the ocean, there is a lot of pressure from the water above the vessel, the submarine. The vessel is the submarine. There are so many different words: vessel, craft, submarine, that you can use. So there's so much pressure from the weight of the water of the ocean on above the craft that when you open the door, then there is an enormous amount of water that will fill in, that would fill this part of the craft, and she would die basically because she would be crushed by the water, by the weight of the water. So she, in knowing the risks, she opened the window, she opened the door, and possibly died. It's not clearly said. It's not said, express clearly in the text. You can't read it specifically in the text exactly, but we, with Leah's detailed explanations about the functioning of the water and the relation with the water and the how things work, we can understand that the pressure would. So we learn that we deduct that she has died because page 186, at the bottom of the page, she says, of course, this is all predicated on the pressure outside not being such as the doors opening would result in one being instantly crushed. So knowing that, Jelka basically committed suicide by this act. She could not bear hearing the sound of this voice any longer. And knowing that they've been stuck in this craft for nearly 5 months, 5 or 6 months, we're approaching, I think, here the end of their mission, which was what they were meant to stay only 3 weeks down in the ocean, and they ended up with the suspicious accident. Because all of a sudden nothing was functioning in the craft, so they can't really explain. And Matteo is wondering whether this accident was planned by the center. So they start questioning everything, and now it's been almost 5 or 6 months that they have been stuck in this craft. So you can imagine that their mind might get crazy, and then we learned that also. Yeah. Then we learn that Leah, from Miri's chapter, remember that Leah has lost her eye. So here we are, perhaps a couple months after Leah got back, finally got back. And here we learned that Miri went to get a bandage for Leah's face because Leah doesn't want to see a doctor. So yeah, that's hi, hello Keti, thank you for joining. So I'm just finishing recapping the reading from yesterday. So I'm going to quickly finish this and start reading the last pages. Thank you. Hello, thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, please leave a message in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So this is what we were at. And more and more, and Leah is spending more and more time in the bathtub, in the water, and she started by spending a couple hours, then days, and now she spends hours and even days, I would say, immersed in the water, and at this point, Miri realizes that Leah doesn't need air to breathe inside when she is under the water. So as we of course imagine that Leah is mutating into a fish or something. We imagine, maybe we speculated and discussed that maybe she might be a mermaid. She might become a mermaid. We don't really know, but it doesn't seem to make sense because she lost her eye. So a mermaid with just one eye, maybe. And the thing is, her skin is becoming translucent, or translucent, yeah, or transparent. So she would look more like a jellyfish, I would say, than mermaid. That, looking at the description in the text. So we're not sure, just guessing here. And from Leah's account of the mission, we also learned that she, after Jelka's death, Leah could now hear the voice. It was her turn now to hear the voice that Jelka heard. So that's also a point that might explain why Leah's state when she got back from the mission. Miri often and again remembering about the time her mother got sick and the fact that she had to pack up the things in the house. There's always a parallel theme in the novel and in Miri's recollection of the events. And then we ended the chapter, the session with the chapter of Miri, page 204 and 5, in which she realizes that she cannot keep Leah in the flat anymore. She at some point wants to change the water from the bath because she's been soaking in this same water for days now, and she would like to change the water with clean water. And when she's about to lift her and take her out of the bath, Leah fights her. She doesn't want to leave the bathtub, and at this point she is she's dropping her eye again from her face, from the bandage, I guess. And Miri, I guess, is just hopeless here, and she calls Juna, Jelka's sister, if you remember, the sister, the girl who contacted Miri about what happened in the craft. And well, we don't really know what she told her, but she revealed that Jelka had died. So this is where we ended the live reading session yesterday. And yeah, I struggled with this verb called sluice, which is the right pronunciation. So page 205, you've got this sentence: I half expect her to sluice. So I pronounced it slew eyes, but I was wrong. I checked because, you know, as non-native speakers and probably, and sometimes, yeah, I would say, yeah, non-native speakers, we because I think that yeah, even as native speaker, you'd probably guess. But anyway, but for some reason I pronounce it slew eyes, but it's like juice. You see the word juice, Juice. Well, here it's written the same. So except that at the beginning it starts with Sluice. So this verb, sluice. So think about juice now. If you come across this verb again, now pronounce it correctly. So this verb is a synonym to wash. So I half expect her to sluice through my fingers. So to wash through my finger. So I would say that she's like soap, I guess I would say. Not sure. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify this information and just do a little bit of grammar, I would say, for today. And pronunciation, not really grammar here. I have to be very specific, but pronunciation point. Right. Okay, let's get started. I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments if this little little pronunciation point was helpful. Right. So let's get started and let's find out all the mystery. Very helpful. Thank you. Oh, great. I'm happy to help. Great. And it's helpful for me as well. So if you come across, it's not always, pronunciation is so tricky because I mean, I would have seen the word juice because it's a word that is so familiar. I would have not thought about the pronunciation. But looking at this word, it didn't really came to my mind that it was the same spelling. So UICE is, well, UI is you, is the pronunciation as you. So it's interesting as you just need, sometimes there's a couple letters different and you would pronounce it differently. Although if you follow the rule, if there is one really, because there are always exceptions, but here it works. I would say the rule works. So yeah, sluice. Okay, let's get started. Leah, I wasn't aware of the power returning, only that when it did, we were on the main deck. Oh, so the power returned. So remember that I told you that suddenly nothing was working in the craft. And on the comms deck, if you imagine, if you have watched films about submarines or yeah, whatever films happening in the ocean, and you've got this board with a lot of buttons, control buttons, and that's the comms deck. So I would imagine, I'm not an expert, but this is how I imagine it. So I wasn't aware of the power returning, only that when it did, we were on the main deck, and that suddenly the light was not what it had been seconds previously. The overheads blinked back on as casual as anything at all, along with the beams from the front of the craft, and at once we saw the darkness from what it was. Jesus Christ, said Matteo, and then covered his mouth. I mean, he seemed frozen, looked towards the control panel without moving his neck, like a person being stalked by a jungle creature and desperate to avoid being seen. Don't move, he said. I don't know why. It might go off again. The power, it might notice we're still here. I looked at him, noticed the tendons on his neck pulled taut, staining to keep his head from swiveling. That's ridiculous, isn't it? He said. And then, Jesus Christ, again. Fuck. My voice felt too big in my mouth, like I was trying to swallow something without first chewing sufficiently. The lights along the control panel glowed a faint electric yellow, but the way they were supposed to do. Matteo's circle of torches, still upright as they were, seemed dimmed in the sudden brightness of the whole compartment. I could hear a faint whirring sound, the vibration of a craft in order, of a working mechanism rattling suddenly to life. Beside me, in the unaccustomed light, Matteo was sweating. This is insane, he said, and then, we can go. If it works, we can surface. We could do it now. He flicked his eyes once again towards the main panel. He remained frozen in place, as if convinced that a single move could trip a wire that threw us back into darkness. Jesus Christ, he said again, and I felt quite certain he was about to cry. Are they allowing us to do this? Is this what those fucks want? Just to send us down and bring us back up again? Are they doing this, or is something else doing this? What if it works? I remember I looked at him then, and I thought, with a clarity I hadn't experienced in ages, that it wasn't supposed to be like this. I remember I looked at him then, and I thought, not yet, just once. And then I looked towards the windows in the spill of the exterior lights. It feels like she doesn't want to go back up. I have always felt there is something knowable about the sea, something within comprehension. And I knew that I couldn't allow opposite to be true. We couldn't. And I felt this with a force like a taste, like copper washed up against the backs of my teeth. We couldn't go until I had seen it. until we had seen some vestige of what we had come down to see. Not yet, I thought to myself once more, and with a sort of ridiculous earnestness. I can't defend. My body's slack around me. Everything suddenly superfluous, but the desire to see what I needed to see. We will, I said then, and thought about Miri once with a hard stabbing pain, and Mattia looked at me. Buddy, I promise you. And I was moving towards... Oh, buddy, I promise you. And I was moving towards the main panel with my body little enough, my own at this point, that I barely felt aware of it. I promise you will before the power goes. And Matteo was moving now, breaking out of his temporary freeze to come towards me. Buddy, please, he said, and his hand moved across the outer edge of the border made by the torch circle to take hold of my arm. We can go, he said, and I looked at his fingers, the blistered black skin that bubbled up towards the nails and the blank space toward the outermost point of the fist where nothing remained. I looked at his fingers and I said, but you have to understand this, don't you? When you went ice fishing with your dad and you knew what was happening and you ignored it, when you told me you said you didn't want to ruin it, you didn't want to go just yet. He held onto my arm, worked his mouth without producing a sound. Out of the silence there rose once again the voice I knew Jelka had been hearing, the voice I hadn't let her explain. I promise you, I said again. We won't lose power, I promise. I just want to know, I said, without really meaning to say this part aloud. I just want to know that this wasn't for nothing. I just want to know what's here. He didn't release his grip on my arm, though he allowed me to move one step towards the panel and then another, his fingers loosening in the manner of someone dazed or briefly distracted, his face now turned towards the glass. I don't see anything different, he said. Even with the lights on, it doesn't look like anywhere at all. I didn't follow his gaze, thought instead about the slow, deep salt of the ocean and all I knew about it, thought instead about the lights of the craft and moving away from where we were into something new. It would be okay, I said, and tugged my wrist gently away from his grasp. He appeared to let me go for a moment before blinking, grabbing once again for my arm and pulling it back as his eyes moved down from the windows and back to me. No, he said, his voice falling downwards from his mouth like something dropped. He tightened his grip on my arm, pulled me back with a force that shouldn't have been painful but left me strangely blank. We're going to... He started and paused again, his jaw working, raised his other hand in a gesture that might have meant anything. Are you going to slap me? I said, and he stopped my arm and looked at his fingers, and I felt my unkindness in the twist of his mouth, but found there was nothing I could say to make it better. I started, and then abandoned the thought, felt it slip from the upper drift of my mind to somewhere lower. Sunken thoughts, said a voice in my head that was not mine, and then I moved towards the main panel, ignoring the place where someone has smashed a segment of keyboard with a torch, preparing to wake up the main engine and pilot the craft across the ocean floor. After this, Matteo did very little of anything, sat dumb as though unable to believe what I had said to him or what I was choosing to do. The craft responded to my controls with the ease of something that had never been out of commission, and I wondered, with a semi-hysterical pinch of amusement, whether we might simply have misunderstood the situation all along, taken a broken light for a craft that could not be moved. We slipped through the water, the darkness opening out only into further darkness, the lights from the front of the craft, and the senses picking up a geography of irregular basalt, wide open crags of rock that spoke to broad crevasse, something deep and narrow into which we had fallen, and yet not one living thing. I'm not sure how long I moved us forward through this darkness, the strange emptiness opening up before us. The further we went, I remember now that I caused that smell again, the burning flesh, the rendering of something too hot to keep its form. Though I'm not sure if that is something I really registered or something I superimposed over the memory at some later point. Come on, I found myself thinking, as I had wised, staring out into the white blankness of the window and longing only for some struggle of life. Come on, I found myself thinking, give. And movement then, as if in acknowledgement, at last, a movement in the dark. Now, I just thinking, I've been saying that perhaps those different sections, those layers reflect the different stages of Miri and Leah's relationship, but actually I realize, maybe you tell me whatever you think, but perhaps it represents the layers, the stages at which the craft is when Leah is talking at this stage of the book. So the craft is in the sunlight. No, perhaps no, that doesn't work, because at the beginning, from the beginning of the she starts because Leah starts talking about the beginning of from the beginning of the book. She is saying that something has gone wrong with the control machines of the craft. So I don't think it represents the difference. Yeah, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Okay, Miri. When Leah came back, they called me at an odd time to let me know. 3 o'clock, too late for lunch. My gaze trained on the patch of carpet that seemed slightly lighter than the space around it. I didn't realize at the time, but she had actually been back for 2 weeks when the center got in touch. Strange, don't you think? What happened over those 2 weeks? Yeah. Another mystery. We've been operating a cautionary quarantine. The woman on the phone explained to me, as I'm sure you would expect. I remember her tone as conversational, yet curiously distant distant in the literal sense, as though she was holding the phone away from her. The background noise was difficult to pass, a shuttling sound, a succession of jerkings and shudderings, as though someone was moving large pieces of furniture across the floor. "You're welcome to come and pick her up," the woman on the phone informed me. I had to ask her for an address and then to wait while I fetched a pen. I remember very little about that afternoon. I put on shoes and found there were the wrong ones for the weather. But by that point, I had already left the flat. I hailed a cab and did not ask about the price. The center was somewhere outside the city, a few minutes from the coast, but I couldn't tell you where exactly, or how big it was, or even what it looked like. I remember only a car park, tumbleweeded through with crisp packets, the way all car parks are, and a sickish lurch at the base of my ribs, perversely bridle with anticipation. And then Leah, suddenly present, as though she had manifested. Nothing on her but the clothes she wore. No bag, no nothing. As though they had bundled her out in a hurry. I remember this, the way she stood and looked at me, half raised her arms and then dropped them as though uncertain of her welcome, and the way I ran towards her anyway, the bright reality of her, and felt such white, blinding love and relief that all other memories from that day disappeared. Some 20 minutes after I call her, Juna is outside in a dark green Volvo, and each thighs decal in the back window above a sticker. An itch thighs, another word, an itch thighs decal in the back window above a sticker reading, "Would you follow Jesus this close?" "My sister's car," she explains when she catches me looking. Don't have the energy to scrap the fuckers off. She's wrapped up in a moleskin coat over what would appear to be pajamas. She looks at me frankly, a stickiness of bed still clinging to her edges, and I find that I badly want to call Carmen or Sam or anyone at all who isn't the stranger in front of me now. Keti is saying, sometimes I think that these areas related to Leah's physical changes. Interesting. Also, yeah, makes sense, definitely. The deeper it is, the more liquid Leah becomes. Yes. Yes, and maybe she's becoming one of those creatures that are in the Adal zone that we don't know exist, perhaps. Yeah, I like this suggestion as well. Okay, let's continue. And I find that I badly want to call Carmen and Sam or anyone at all who isn't the stranger in front of me now. "So where are we going?" she asks in an even tone, as though the two of us are simply deciding where we might go for lunch. I tell her to follow me upstairs. My neighbors my neighbor's television can be heard from the communal stairwell. Two reality stars from a show I don't remember the name of, gossiping like ghosts in the wall. Climbing the stairs behind me, Tuna raises her eyebrows. Bit late for it, she says. And I appreciate this. It is because of this, I think, that I choose not to warn her, pushing open the bathroom door without first turning to say, okay, so I know you won't believe this, but her reaction appears to justify this instinct. She appraises Leah in the bathtub, looks at me, eyes the towels I have piled, soaping wet in the sink. Okay, she says. So I guess we'll need water. We fill several plastic bottles from the tap, take out the washing up bowls. I keep under this take out the washing up bowls I keep under the sink and fill them too, mixing salt into each before ferrying them down to the Volvo. We place the washing up bowls in the footwells behind the front seats in the and stack the bottles in the passenger seat before returning to the flat. I can help you, Juna says, if you want me to, but I ask her instead to go into the wardrobe and pack up whatever look like appropriate clothes for a trip. When she's out of the room, I pull Leah up out of the water as gently as I can, trying to ignore the rattling protest of her breath as she surfaces, the way her hand clenches down and then releases, the terrible softness of her body, like a plastic bag overfilled with water. I wrap her up in the salt water soaked towels, two around her torso and another at her legs, mermaiding her thighs together. So she attached them, together. Mermaiding, that's interesting. Together, her thighs together, twisting two damp clothes around her wrists, where the pulse beats fast and fluid. I leave her face until last, lift her up and look at her, at the traces of a person I still recognize. And then Gina calls from the other room, and I think to myself, okay. And then I take the white flannel from the edge of the sink and I press it over her face. I feel very little as I do this. I think I am going to take care of you. And then I think about Leah. Saturday mornings, going through our electric bill or our gas or water bill, because she knew it was something I hated to do. And then I think of nothing at all. In the car, I stretch her out across the back seats, hold her head in my lap, and listen to the shiver of her breathing through the salt wet flannel. Every so often, I will take this flannel away from her, dip it in one of the basins of the water at my feet, and return it to her face again. I give Juna directions and imagine our upstairs neighbors waking up in the morning somehow, knowing that their television now only plays to an absence below. The night is dark, and Juna drives us into it, and I feel vaguely doomed, vaguely certain of an ending I can see. Leah. Miri said this to me once. Every horror movie ends the way you know it will. If you're watching a movie about werewolves, you can be almost certain your hero will become one by the end. If you're watching a movie about vampires, same thing. Ghosts too. I think if the hero wasn't already a ghost to begin with, I thought about this a little at the end of things. I pressed my hands into the glass and knew the thing I'd always known, that we were in the ocean and that we couldn't be alone. We had come to what appeared to be kind of we had come to what appeared to be kind of drop, the crevasse into which we had fallen, widening out the crevasse, which is perhaps I don't know, a hole between two when you have, it feels like you've got the bottom or the earth, and when the earth is crackling on the road, for example, and you've got a line separating the sides of the road, so it feels like the crevasse is. It feels like the craft fell into that. I don't know, into that hole between the earth. I don't know, two sides of the earth. I think if the hero wasn't already, I pressed my hands into the glass and knew the thing I'd always known, that we were in the ocean, and that we couldn't be alone. We had come to what appeared to be a kind of drop, the crevasse into which we had fallen, widening out for some meters before stopping sharply at what one sight resembled a valley in the ocean floor. On taking a read from the senses, however, I saw that what appeared to be a gentle dip was in fact a great break, a chasm in the ground beneath us. Like something shattered or pulled apart. Vast staggers of basalt scattering downwards into a chasm that appeared to fall some 100 feet beneath the point at which we currently sat. For several moments, I tried to make sense of this, the idea that there could be somewhere deeper still beneath us, the idea of what the blankness of this new drop might enclose. But then, of course, I stopped reading from the senses or expecting to make sense of anything at all. During all this, you must understand, I had been aware and not aware of the burning smell, which had aware and not aware. Okay, always very confusing. Of the burning smell, which had dodged so much of our time below the water, aware yet not aware of the sound that had curled around our craft for so long, the sound we had heard so often, and the voice inside that sound. You have to understand the way I sense these things getting closer, the smell and the sound, or rather our growing closer to them, and yet did not put together an explanation for any of this. You have to understand that there was no way for me to know, no way for me to predict what I was doing, because how could I, really? How could I know something which simply could not be the case? I remember I saw it, the eye, and then the face beyond the eye, the way it rose up from the chasm below us and kept rising, the way it filled the windows, filled filled my field of vision. So filled, the verb filled, and my filled, the field, you know, the maybe yeah, it's the same word. The field is, you know, well, it is used as the word field means the ground, the land, you know, when you a portion of land, yeah. And we use it also to say the field of vision. Okay, we use it in the same word, the same expression in French actually, and now I realize that we also use it in English. So that's interesting. So the field of vision, perspective, I would say. My field of vision seemed to fill the whole ocean by itself. I don't know how to tell you this, really. I remember thinking of the octopus I had care for. Pamela, I remember. Dear old Pamela. Uh, where was I? The field of it seemed to fill the whole ocean by itself. I don't know how to tell you this, really. I remember thinking of the octopus I had cared for years ago at the aquarium. I remember thinking of the creatures I had seen in tide pools with my father as a child, the strange spiny things that raced for the water when the tide began to wane. I remember thinking that the first things had come from the water, which didn't account for the things that had chosen to stay behind. I remember thinking all of this and then thinking that it wouldn't help me, and then thinking that the creature before us was still rising, that it now stretched up towards us, the eye rearing towards our ship, somewhere beside me. Matteo might have made a sound, might have spoken to me. I couldn't tell you now. I thought about Jalka telling me the thing she was hearing simply couldn't be a ghost. I thought about this and I tried to listen to what it was I was hearing, what this creature was saying to me. Really tried to listen, to separate the fact of the voice from the words themselves. I remember that, but I don't remember whether I understood anything, whether the words shaped themselves into anything like sense down there, in the place we shouldn't have fallen to. I remember only the vastness of the creature rising up before us and a sudden certainty that it had been here all along. The eye moved in, still closer, and somewhere beside me, I felt Matteo moving back. Myself, I did not feel so much unable to move as lacking the energy to do so. I looked into that eye, now feeling the entire view of the windows, and I felt with exhaustion, which sat down inside me as though unable to support its own weight, that there would never be any way of knowing whether we had come here intentionally, whether we had been pulled down or pushed. I felt all this, and then I passed my hand over the panel, the small etched eye of my the small etched image of an eye, which was not the center's logo, which did not appear to stand for anything at all, and reached for the leather log book and pen, which we kept beneath the central console, thus far untouched. I pulled this out, and without pausing to consider what I was doing, I wrote my name on the first page of the log book and pressed it to the window so that the creature could see. Oh, so she wrote this. So she had this book, logbook is where a logbook, I would say, is where you record everything that's happening, and a bit like yeah, journaling, I would say, or but it's more like recording what probably they what at what time, what did they see, or what happened at this time, etc. uh or maybe not, yeah, not maybe the time, but probably just recording what was happening in the craft. And she wrote her name on the page, and she turned it and showed it to the creature as a way to introduce herself. This is Leah. I'm Leah. Interesting. It's trying to communicate with the creature. Miri. Sometimes I imagine my mother and Leah meeting, though this is not a thing which ever actually happened. Remember that Miri's mother didn't seem to be quite agreeing with her relation with this relationship. I guess that she didn't like the fact that Miri was in love with a woman. So she perhaps not reject her daughter, but she kind of refused to accept the presence of Leah. Of Leah, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of doing some light here. Okay. In the fantasy, if fantasy is quite the word, this typically takes place at my mother's house by the sea. And perhaps my mother has never been ill, or perhaps she has, but I haven't failed her. I have chosen to take better care of her, and this has saved her in whatever impossible way. Most of the time, what happens is that she and Leah get along so well that they start having little jokes that exclude me, and I join this enormously. Some of the time, Leah takes my mother down to the beach below the house and tells her something she has told me many times before, that we think of the place we live as important, but that a far greater percentage of the world is made up of the ocean, that most of the creatures that live on the planet live there. And this dream, if dream is quite the word, my mother tells her that that's a terrible, pretentious thing to say. This makes Leah laugh, which is what makes my mother like her. We arrive in the early morning. White mist. A mist, remember, it's the watery kind of weather in the morning. White mist in the ground, like a tripwire. My mother's house is yet as yet untouched by the first of the light. Juna was driven at what seems to me a mad pace for a route she isn't familiar with, but I can't deny that when we round the elm grove that covers the headland and come down into the final stretch of road, I feel a sort of wide relief I have really not expected, and I lean forwards to tell her so. Nothing easier, she says, waving a hand. Do you think I can park just anywhere? At this point, I haven't been to the house in several years. I've expressed the intention of selling it on more than one occasion, and then failed to follow through. Selling it in some way seemed like the last thing. And so instead, I gutted it of its useful attributes, stole its furniture, pulled its teeth, and left it standing as it was. Once inside, The main rooms carry a particular chill of disuse, blank spaces on the walls, stained darker colors by the missing frames and photographs in the main room. I pull the dust sheets from the sofas and briefly feel my mother at my elbow, though when I turn, her chair is empty. In the doorway, Julia clears her throat and I turn, find her leaning there, the shadow in the with a shadow in the passage behind her, which again I take to be my mother, though in truth it is only the shape of Juna's coat, which she has removed and hung from a hook on the door. We should get out of her. We should get her out of the car, I say, and she nods at me. And then I need a cup of tea. I can turn the water on at the mains, but I'm not sure where we're going to find a tea bag. We get Leah in, somehow move her up to my mother's bathroom, where I pour the salt water into the bath from the bottles we have brought before filling it the rest of the way from the taps. I unwrap her from her towels as gently as I can and maneuver her into the water. Her hair like a halo, and her bandage slipping down to reveal the wide dark space where her eye should be. I kneel down by the side. Oh, so there is no, yeah, it's strange. There's a black hole here. I kneel down by the side of the bath and ask her to forgive me for moving her, for the car journey she had been in no position to approve. I just seemed like the best. It just seemed like the best thing, I said to her, noticing as I do so that the remains of her face are weeping sideways in the water, becoming something less like flesh and more like liquid. It just seemed like something I had to do when I was younger. I think some glib of or cavalier part of me always believed that there was no such thing as a heartache, that it was simply a case of things getting in past the rib cage and finding there was no way out. I know now, of course, that this was a stupid thing to think. Insofar as most things we believe will turn out to be ridiculous in the end. The day is cold, too long, because we started early. Washed curiously blank by the rain, which comes in off the sea and lasts well into the afternoon. For the most part, I stay in the bathroom with Leah, though at irregular intervals. Juna comes in offering cups of tea, a sleeve of penguin biscuits, explaining that she took the car back up across the tops and stopped to buy supplies at a petrol station. She had noticed on the way in. At some point, I suppose at lunchtime, she tells me she thinks I ought to come downstairs and eat something. And when I refuse, she comes and sits with me in the corridor outside the bathroom with a plastic plate of sandwiches and the door ajar, and tells me some of what she knows. She tells me that when the craft surfaced, only Leah and one other crew member were aboard. That she isn't sure of the other crew member's name or condition. I have not assumed the same happened to them. I have to assume, sorry, I have to assume the same happened to them as Leah, she says, or is happening to them, whoever they were. Or maybe I don't. Maybe they quarantined like Leah and went home just fine. Maybe they're fine now. I don't know how we found out. I remember his name. I think I think of telling her. I remember Leah worked with him before. She tells me that the center informed her via letter of her sister's accidental death during the course of the dive and explained that, as was regulation, the body had been expelled from the craft while still submerged. She had not been encouraged, she said, to come down to the center, but did so anyway after several unhelpful phone calls, as she believed they might be in possession of various of her sister's effects. She tells me only as an aside that during the long absence of the dive, she had grown increasingly convinced that someone with information was trying to call her on the phone. You said it happened to you, she says, which is why I mention it. Sometimes I thought it was someone from the center too, someone trying to warn me and losing their nerve. Other times I imagine it was all just a practical joke. The whole thing can feel like a joke to me now, a little. So I'm not sure I'd even be surprised. Now that makes me think that perhaps it's Matteo trying to contact them. Did you think? Maybe. This is, yeah, that's just clicked. Now, I don't know. Okay, let's continue. It would make sense, to be honest. Okay, let's continue. On arriving at the center, she has been told that Leah and the other crew member were both in quarantine and that any person belongings would be subject to the same restrictions. She tells me calmly enough that an altercation followed. This is how she describes it too. There was an altercation. I mean, you have to understand my sister's dead. You have to understand my sister's dead, and here's some bitch of at what amounts to a front desk at this creepy place I've never visited before telling me I can't have what? Her shoes? Her underwear? These weird fucking people. I remember Jelka when she first got the job, she just kept saying these people are weird. Oh, that's true. And I thought, and could think that she was just a little bit not very grateful for, organizing the whole party and everything. Yeah, makes sense now. So I start arguing, obviously. I'll tell them. So it feels like we're in the same, in Miri's position, realizing all the things that we didn't really picked on at the beginning of the novel. I remember, So I start arguing, obviously. I tell them I'm going to go to the newspapers or get a lawyer, that all of this sounds wrong to me, that they never told us what was happening when they went down and didn't come up. I say all kinds of crazy shit, that I think they hired them under false pretenses, that my sister and the rest didn't know what it was they were getting into, that it was all a sham, and on and on and on and on like that, until eventually some other guy comes out and I'll tell him, no, I don't want a fucking supervisor. I want whoever is the most senior person at this place. And then finally, this guy appears. This guy who's wearing a fucking sports coat, mind you, like a sports coat and jeans. And he tells me, hey, my name is whatever. See, I don't even remember his name. And he tells me that, of course, he wants to help. Oh, that's probably that guy that Leah described. Or was it Miri? Yeah, that Miri described as being having being a little bit pretentious, and I can't remember. And she compared him to someone famous. I can't remember. Maybe, yeah. Okay. That probably the same guy she's talking about. Um, she tells me that after this other man appeared, Leah in the back of my mind, jokingly referring to the boss. Yeah, the boss. That's the guy at the going away party. Everything was easy, that they gave her sister's effect, as though there had never been an issue, that he even passed her a personal number and told her to call him if there was anything else he could do. It was weird, she says. This weird, loopy little attitude he had, like it was all fine, like he could make it fine. I didn't think to try the number until a few weeks afterwards, but of course, when I rang it, there was just a message saying the line was no longer in service. It was meant to be a research trip. It was meant to be a research trip, just observing, taking notes. I don't know what it really was, but I've been trying to find out. She sits beside me in silence for a while after this. Still, as it only occurs to me now, in last night's pajamas, her skin without makeup, the consistency of something clawed with a fork. I say nothing, only glancing at my sandwich and thinking in a dull sort of way that this should all be more interesting to me than it is. I think, Gina says after a pause, that the thing about losing someone isn't the loss, but the absence of afterwards. Do you know what it means? The endlessness of that. She looks sideways at me and sniffs. My friends were sad. Were sad. People who knew. Sorry, I don't know why I repeated twice. My friends were sad. People who knew my sister were sad, but everyone moves on after a month. It's all they can manage. It doesn't mean they weren't sad, just that things keep going on something or something. I don't know. She rolls her shoulder, shakes her head. It's hard when you look up and realize that everyone moved off and left you in that place by yourself. Like they've all gone, they've all gone on, and you're there still holding on to this person you're supposed to let go of. Let go of them in the water is something I read once. Seems a bit of joke in the circumstances, but still. Something about how living means relinquishing the dead and letting them drop down or fall or sink. Letting go of them in the water, I look at her and I feel the collection of curious things, none of which feel quite correct for the circumstances. I feel the coolness I always feel towards strangers, the gentle yawn of distance. I still can't help but preserve, even despite her sharing all of this with me. I feel too the blank exhaustion of everything. The fact that I should not be out here, but in the bathroom with Leah. The fact that I need to message Carmen and tell her I hope her eyes are doing better. The fact that I need to call Sam and apologize for dropping off the face of the earth. For dropping off the face of the earth is that she disappeared. She didn't give any news anymore. I lean my head back against the wall for a second and then roll it sideways until it is resting on Juna's shoulder. She allows me to do this, hunches up a little to prevent me stretching my neck. And for a moment, I'm able to banish my other thoughts and feel only what I ought to feel, which is grateful. Here are some things I didn't have space for. Putting on Alone by heart and miming the lyrics in Leah's face until she started laughing. Leah's long hands on her yellow hair and the werewolf quality to her eyebrows. The way she walked around the flat in shorts and a sports bra and told me off to staring. The way she kissed me and then apologized for biting. The time Leah told me that making me laugh was always an achievement because my face was so typically set against it. The way I was often bored and Leah never was. Talking with Leah on the early dates about the panic of doing what everyone else was doing and then feeling like a dick about it. The way Leah was kind by nature, where I always seemed to have to struggle. The way she tipped my face towards hers and told me otherwise. You're the kindest person I know. And I know 6 or 7 people. So here is what happens, obviously. Morning again. A rain that persists at first, grows full and hammering in its insistence, and then passes away without warning. A white sky, the windows filled with sharp corners of sunlight. I had not intended to take Leah down to the water, but when I wake beside the bath, having apparently fallen asleep with my cheek against the lip of the tub, I catch the direction of her remaining eye beneath the surface, the way it turns towards the window, and I think, well, yes. I soak the towels again, wrap her up as before, and maneuver her down the stairs. I find Juna lying awake on one of my mother's sofas, still in pajamas, and with one arm pillowed behind her head. She doesn't ask me where I'm going or whether she needs me to come with her, only nods her head towards the moleskin coat still hanging from the hook on the door and tells me there is something in the pocket she'd like me to have. Later on, she says, if you like, it was in with Jalka's things when they gave them to me. But it's actually Leah's, something she wrote, pages and pages. I brought it to give it to you the first time we met, but it didn't seem like you'd want to take it. It's how I knew to come and find you. Not, she adds, with the strange sort of smile I'm just about getting used to, that you ever asked. It is not difficult getting Leah down to the water. You might imagine it would be, but by this point, the lightness in her body adds little to the weight of the towels which I've used to bundle her up. I take her up into my arms and carry her out towards the smuggler's path, a narrow track cut down into the cliffside which rears round my mother's house, protected from worst of the wind by a high tangle of gorse, which grows up like a wall along its sea-facing side. The path is more tunnel than lane, enclosed by an overarching shrubbery. I focus on my feet. and the tight nestle of Leah in my arms, and I think about nothing very much besides the rattle of her breathing and the fact that I have not heard a voice in something like 2 weeks. The path winds further down the cliffside and along for several minutes before turning suddenly inland, rising up steeply, and then evening out as we emerge at last onto a flat and grassy overhang, which juts out above a narrow inlet some feet below. Pausing to catch my breath, I glance down over the edge, where a system of caves reveals itself, flooded by waves in the waning tide. One fork of the path we are standing on splits off and straggles downwards, a precarious but viable route down to the beach. Smugglers used to stow rum in those caves. So rum, I don't know. Is it the alcohol? Oh yeah, rum, brandy. Okay, rum is the alcohol, rum. In those caves, I say now, my voice conversational, something I barely recognize. Did I ever tell you that? Rum, brandy, tea leaves, whatever they could get. They could moor here in good weather without being seen. Towns too far inland for anyone to have heard them or seen them coming in. See those rocks just before the base? I nod my head in the direction of the water, look down at Leah as though expecting her to respond. Could throw a rope around just about any one of them. No problem at all. Tide's never completely out here. The spot of the headland juts out so far, but it's dry towards the backs of the caves most of the time. So it was the perfect place to store things you didn't want to be found. Sometimes they'd even sleep there. Those caves go pretty far back, but they certainly don't get roomier the further in you get. I knew a boy at school who got stuck there once for almost a day and a half, just mucking about, you know. Just mucking about is funny expression. Is just the way that he was having fun there. Very a typical British expression here. Mucking about. Messing around. But mucking about, yeah. It's very typical. I think he did it on a dare. Eventually, the Coast Guard had to come and fish him out. We got to watch the whole thing from the house, my mother and me. I don't think I ever told you that. I don't know why I didn't. The beach is just over the next rise, the sand yawning out like a bite taken out of the coastline, a mile at least towards a rocky outcrop that seems to mark its natural end. The sea reels outwards, the tide some distance off and still retreating, revealing an extra inch of sand with every heave. It's early still, deserted before us, and I know what I am doing now. I take her down towards the water, feet sinking in wet sand, lug-warm tunnels, or weed stretching up the beach like clambering hands. The water, when it penetrates my shoes, is freezing. The tight, cold climbing sharply up my ankles, but I continue outwards, down into the water, until the tide is at my calves. And then the calves is basically, I don't want to, it's the part of your body, it's so you've got the thigh and the calf is this. It's just after. um where was I? I continue outwards, down into the water until the tide is at my calves and then my knees. I keep Leah high in my arms, move further, press my feet into the sand when the water is at chest height, kick my legs and push us further. Hold her in as closely as I can. The waves are gentle here, an easing surge of early morning. I no longer have much purchase on the I no longer have much purchase on the sand, one leg tangled up with seaweed, mouth filling once with water, then again. I have never been a very good swimmer, even after Leah's lessons, and it is this thought, this memory, which makes me grasp her tighter, pulling her into me from where my arms have slackened with the cold. A desperate squeeze inside my heart. My Leah, the way she held me around the waist at the Lido and told me to kick, told me that she would buoy me. Yeah, should buoy me along. My Leah. But I can see it happen, but I can see it happening already. Look down at her in my arms as the towels fall away, weighed down by the water that has saturated each in turn and left them too heavy to cling. Passingly, I think that this might always have been inevitable, that perhaps she'd always known it, but I had wanted to hold on for me for as long as she could. I can see it now. The way her chest begins to frill. I can see it now. The way her chest begins to frill. The upward swell and tremor of the skin that registers its natural habitat, growing first translucent, then entirely clear. I can feel as well the way the body I am holding is becoming less a body, the way she slides between my fingers. First my Leah, then the water. First my Leah's arms, her chest, her ribcage, then the water. They are struggling towards. I think of nothing. Then I think about the sea lung, the day on the beach with Leah, where the ice sat on the water and the air around us seemed about to take some other form. The alchemist's sea, changing something into something else. I think of this and I look at her face, the remains of her face, my Leah. She's looking at me, this now, the last of her. And she is still looking at me when I move my arms to release her, when she melts between my hands and into water, twisting down into the rolling tide. What persists after this is only air and water, and me between them, not quite either, and with one foot straining for the sand. So they don't even talk. Oh my gosh. Okay, last paragraph of the novel. Leah. We surfaced, of course. This is something to remember, that we turned towards the panel after who knows how many hours spent staring into that eye, and told the craft to take us upwards, that we grasped each other's hands, Matteo and I, and begged a being neither of us believed in, and begged a being neither of us believed in to allow us to surface, and begged a being neither of us believed in to allow us to surface. I don't remember much about the rest. I know the creature did not stop us, though its eye held a strange anticipatory expression as we receded, if expression is the word I want. I know too that Matteo held on to Jelka's rosary beds as we rocked it upwards, as we moved up from darkness into further dark, the light so many miles above our heads. I know all this, and I know that as my head cleared finally of everything, sunken thoughts receding with the thing that we had left below, I thought to myself, Miri, 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 and I waited for the ocean, and I waited for the ocean to end. And that's it. It's much more dry and very factual in Leah's part in the ending of the novel. It's much more emotional in Miri's part, Miri's chapter. Yeah, and then you've got the note and the text. She made her research, the fact that she read a lot of books about the sea, articles, and then the acknowledgement as well. Right, so this is it. So here again, another book done and read with the book club. We did it again. So let me think. I'm gonna leave you now to reflect on the end, and if you're happy with this end, did you imagine another ending, or do you like this one, or what do you think about the ending of the story? And that's it for me for now. So I hope you enjoyed this live reading again, this final live reading of Our Wives Under the Sea. It was a pleasure, as always, to read for you. And of course, if you have any comments or suggestion for further reading, make sure that don't hesitate to leave a comment or take part in the book club so that you can choose the next book. Well, we've got quite a full program for until the end of this year, but for the future live readings, definitely. So this Saturday, we're going to have our last live workshop on Our Wives Under the Sea. So make sure you subscribe to the book club to join us, even if it's the last session, you can still join us. And also remember, you can purchase now the 3-part live workshop of Daisy Jones and the Six on my website store, as I explained at the beginning of this video. I wish you a beautiful end of the day, and I will see you next month for a new live read along. And here is a little bit of an announcement here. So next month we will read Rebecca here. This is an old adaptation, but this is the only one that I could find. The only adaptation, graded reader adaptation of Rebecca from by Daphne du Maurier. So here is the original text. So that's the difference, as you can see. So this adaptation is a B2, so upper intermediate level. So if you want to read this novel, join us. More information will come soon on my website. So make sure you subscribe to the newsletter to have the latest, to all the information about our next live read along. And also follow me on Instagram to be notified when I'm live, and also get all the information about the book club. So you can be part of this beautiful community. Thank you so much for watching this video on replay or being live here on Instagram and take part in the conversation. And I will see you next month then. Bye. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a beautiful evening. Rest of the day, sorry.